Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I would like to offer my greetings and welcome everyone this evening. So many years ago, um, I went for my first tudong. So tudong is it's a Thai word, and it comes from the Pali word dutanga. And dutangas are actually these practices we do for wearing away. And so these are the ascetic practices that monks take on for wearing away our defilements, wearing away our kilesas. And there's 13 of them. But in Thailand, when we use the word tudong, a lot of times, especially for the forest monks, we're talking about this practice of going wandering. So this is where, we take all of our stuff, and just go walking. And sometimes we're going out to find a nice quiet place to practice. Sometimes, we're maybe going, uh, we have a destination in mind, like maybe we're going towards to go find a certain teacher or just looking for a teacher in general, don't have a specific one in mind. But anyways, it's this practice of wandering. And sometimes you go alone, sometimes you go in groups. And so the first time I went on one, I went with a friend of mine. I hadn't done before. I wasn't really sure what to do. So I thought it would be easier going with another monk. And so um, we went. It was a great time. I found it really beneficial, really great. But and a lot of things went really well and was really beneficial. But a lot of things kind of went wrong too. So on the first day of Tudong, I broke my shoes. So for the next couple days, I was walking with no shoes, and it was really hot. It was just the beginning of the cold season. So you're walking on the roads and it's kind of burning your feet a bit. And then we ended up the path we went was, a couple days down just gravel roads. It was off the map. There was no villages. I was just down these gravel roads. So my feet were just in bad shape. Finally, we got to just a little village monastery, and I just walked in and asked one of the monks there for if they had any extra shoes. And luckily, the monk actually knew his teacher. He was just visiting that monastery, and so he got me some shoes. But the only ones they had in my size were bright pink. So I did the rest of my the rest of my tudong in bright pink shoes. And then right after we got the shoes, I started getting sick. And it was like I was catching a cold. And when I get colds and stuff, I get them very bad. So I get really bad, really coughing. So I'm getting sicker and sicker. My feet are still in terrible shape, covered in blisters. I'm having a great time. But then myself and this other monk, we stop at this monastery for the night. And it's a forest monastery in a Burmese tradition. And big monastery, lots of monks there. And we get there and we go pay our respects to the senior monk, and it happens he's good friends with one of the senior monks at the monastery I'm from. So they received us very well, were treated us really nicely, but they saw what kind of like rough shape we were in. A lot of the monks there had never seen feet as blistered as mine. Some of them even took pictures of my feet because they'd never seen that many blisters. So, and then, of course, getting sick. So, when we arrived and paid respects to the senior monk, he gave us this little awada or short little teaching. And one of the things he said in this teaching was, um, if you're uh, if you're doing austere practices without any wisdom or without like knowing why you're doing them, it's actually just atta kilamatanu yoga. So Atta Kilometanu Yoga. This is self torture, or this is when the this is one of the things that Buddha gave up when he talked about finding the middle path. He said to give up kama sukali kanu yoga, so the path of like sensual indulgence, and then to give up also the path of atakila matanu yoga, which is self like self torture. Because a lot of ascetics at that time took this on as a practice, and even the Buddha before he actually found the middle path, he had practiced this um, self torture, or um, as a way of practice. And so this Ajahn was saying to us, you need basically, like, you need to have some wisdom, and you need to know why you're doing ascetic practices to get the benefit of them. If you're doing these practices without knowing why you're doing them, or without having a reason for doing them, you're really just torturing yourself. And I'm sure it was the rough shape we were in, which was inspiring that that reflection from him. But I think this is a really a really good point, a really good teaching. So not in just regards to doing these any type of ascetic practice, it can be doing any type of practice. It's really good to kind of know what we're doing and know why we're doing it. Um, so, having a clear purpose in mind, having a goal, and actually working towards that goal, and having done enough study, enough received enough instruction to really know what we're doing and why we're working towards that. And so you can see in the time of the Buddha in the suttas, there was also cases of this, of people doing these uh, kind of strange ascetic practices, wanting to get the goal, like a high goal and stuff, but because they didn't know what they were doing, and just decided to pick up a practice which didn't kind of align or actually work towards the goal that they had, it wasn't going there. So kind of one of the more interesting stories of it in the suttas, it's a sutta, like, it's called the dog duty ascetic. So there was these two ascetics, and they weren't Buddhist. They were from another belief system, and they went to go see the Buddha. And one of them was the cow duty ascetic, and one of them was the dog duty ascetic. So as their ascetic practice, they took on trying to behave like these animals. So the cow duty ascetic would walk around on all fours, and chew on grass and everything, and the dog duty ascetic would also walk around on all fours and sniff around and lift his leg when he needed to pee, and just tried to behave like these animals. So they went to go see the Buddha, and we're asking him about, uh for this practice we're doing, we're living like this is our practice, and asking about the results they were going to get from it. And the Buddha was like, you don't want to know. I'm not going to tell you. And they kept pushing, come on, just tell us, what do you think our results will be? And the Buddha said to them, well, because you keep asking, if, to the cow duty ascetic, he's like, if you're successful, you'll be reborn as a cow. If you fail, you'll go to hell. And then to the dog duty ascetic, he's like, same thing. If you're successful, you'll be reborn as a dog. If not, it's not going to look good. And so they were really upset. I think, if I remember right, they started crying and stuff because they had dedicated themselves so much to this practice. So this is one of the kind of, at least the way I see it, is it's important for us to have studied enough, to learned enough, that we kind of know how to work towards the goals we have. So, it could be, you could also take the comparison for, say, if someone wanted to lose weight, but they don't learn anything about health, they don't learn anything about fitness or weight loss. And so they're like, okay, well, I think, if I eat a diet of just ice cream, then I'll probably end up losing weight. Ice cream, it's nice and cold, tastes good. This might make me lose weight, but actually it's not. It's going to probably move you in the other direction. So it is important for us to have some basis in study and some basis in learning. And so, the Buddha talked about these three things. You have, in Pali, it's uh, pariyatti, which is like study. Pati, which is your practice, and then Pati Veda, which is actually your realization. So like, the fruit of the practice, the enlightenment. But it's always very interesting because the Buddha never set out like a curriculum you have to learn. There's no like minimum amount you have to learn. There's no maximum amount you have to learn to be able to become enlightened or to be able to reduce suffering. So one of the things is, we have to look at what works for us. And, in the time of the Buddha, there was this one monk. He um I think he was illiterate. He couldn't read. He couldn't memorize any chants, couldn't memorize anything. And his brother was a monk, and his brother was, kind of looked down on him. And I think they went to like some kind of event and didn't invite him. And so, and yeah, because they thought, yo, he can't memorize anything. He doesn't know anything. He's got no chance. But then the Buddha went to him and he gave him this simple teaching. And because this monk, even though, he wasn't good at memorizing, wasn't good at couldn't read or anything like this, but he that didn't mean he wasn't smart. It didn't mean he didn't have wisdom. So he had a lot of samadhi and a lot of wisdom already. And the Buddha gave him this little practice and this little teaching, and he was actually be able to become enlightened. So for him, he only actually needed this really little amount of teaching. Or you can see other ones in the suttas where, a monk just gets one teaching. They hear or a layman gets a teaching from the Buddha and they become enlightened right away. And but then other people, they actually really need to learn a lot. They need to do a lot of studying. So especially if, um, depending the way their character is or their mind works, they like to really fully understand everything, fully get a good grip. So sometimes they'll, on the real extreme thing, they'll really learn all the Abhidhamma, really learn the suttas really well, and be able to get this really um, complete picture of everything in their head. And then you get people on a spectrum everywhere in between. So you can see it in with, some of the monks of more recent times. So say someone like Luang Por Chah, he had done studying, he had studied some Pali and stuff, but then he also he was someone um with a lot of doubts when he started his practice. And so he actually had to really, really test these doubts himself. So he couldn't just, read something and just believe it right away. So he tried to figure these things out. And I remember Ajahn Nando was saying that that was one of the reasons why Luang Por Chah ended up having so much wisdom was because he had to develop it to deal with all the doubts he had. So, one of the ones he talks about was, when the Buddha talks about like these four different postures for meditating, you can walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. And he says to make them even. So Luang Por Chah was like, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to practice evenly the amount of time in each posture? So he tried that out, doing the same amount of time of walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. But then he realized it's actually make your mindfulness even between all these postures. And I know a monk who was telling me that when he was a layman, this was over 20 years ago, he went to Burma and did at one particular monastery, he did this meditation retreat where that was their interpretation of it. So they actually had to practice the same amount of time in all four postures. So they do an hour of walking, an hour of standing, an hour of sitting, an hour of lying down. And he didn't like it. He said the standing was just terrible. It was really painful and really difficult. Um, but yeah, so Luang Por Chah had to get through that. And you also see in again with some of the more contemporary monks, you can see on some there's like Luang Por Bua, not Luang Ta Mahabua, but Luang Por Bua. And he was, from what I've heard in talks by other adjuncts, he was supposed to be, illiterate. He couldn't read and stuff, but he was pretty much universally accepted to be enlightened. And then you have on the other side, you have someone like Luang Por Buddhadasa, who was very well studied. He was very like a scholar and very well respected, and he was pretty much universally accepted to be enlightened as well too. And his monastery, it even went so far at one time as, from what I was reading, it had a policy of that only monks who had studied at least to the study level of being what's called a maha. So this is like there's 9 levels of poly studies in Thailand that monks can do. So this is once you've passed your third level, you get the designation of a maha. So it was no one who wasn't yet a maha could go stay there. But then there was this very respected monk, Lumpur Buddha, and Lumpur Buddha Dasa invited him to come live at his monastery because Lumpur Buddha was getting older. And he's like, "Oh, well, you've got this rule. You can only be Mahas to stay there. And I'm not a Maha, so I guess I can't stay there." Even though, again, he's supposed to be enlightened. And Lumpur Buddha Dasa got rid of their rule after that. But but again, it shows that there's this, there's this spectrum, that we can all fall under for how much study works for us. And when we talk about studying or learning, again, it doesn't have to be like a formal course studying. When we hear that, a lot of times we think back to like school or university, and there's like a curriculum we have to follow, and we've got to really like, crack the textbooks and really, really go at it. But it can just be, casual reading of Dhamma books. It can be reading suttas. It can even just be listening to Dhamma talks. But it's more the idea of learning and getting an idea of practice, of how to practice, and and the benefits of the different things we're doing. So it's one of the things I really like about the teachings of the Buddha, about the Dhamma, is that when the Buddha taught us stuff, he didn't just, say, do this, don't do that. He goes into explanations of why. So, when he talks about, for example, our sila, like our morality, our behavior, he doesn't just say, don't kill. That's it. He goes into and explains, reasons why not to kill for for all the other ones, for stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, um, using intoxicants, all these things, he really goes into and explains it. And again, when he goes into teaching different meditation objects, it gets very well explained. Like, you do this to help with this, you can do this and get this benefit of it. So a lot of times, it's good for us to learn that. I mean, some people, their character, especially if they find a teacher, which is really great, they can just be like, yeah, they just tell them, do this, and then they'll do it. But I find especially with for the Westerners or people who have come new to Buddhism, a lot of times they do need a little more explanation and to tell them why to do that. And you even see it in the monastery that sometimes with the Western monks with the rules, we've got to understand why we're being told to do this, and then again, once you see the benefit of it, it can really give you more enthusiasm and more energy into actually practicing in this way. And so we do have to work on these different the we all of these. We need to do our study, and then our practice. Because if we just study and don't put any of it into practice, it's the same as like, you're wanting to go somewhere and you spend all your time reading the map and studying how to get there, but you never actually leave your house to go there, to travel there. So when we are learning, it's important for us to put that into practice. And it doesn't mean when they talk about pariyati, patipati, patiweda, it doesn't mean we have to do all of our study first before we start practicing. We can do them together. As we're practicing, we're learning more, doing more practice, and the two end up helping each other. Because sometimes, again, you think, okay, maybe I should just, learn first and then practice later. But we can, work on them both together. So I'd like to offer this as a bit of an encouragement and a bit of a reflection for everyone this evening.